Hi, in this video I will rant a bit about the state of the cycling industry and the bicycle offers that are available today. Some people love it the way it is, and I'm really happy for them, and for me and for people who need bicycles to serve them so that they are simple and reliable and easy and cheap to repair while performing acceptably. It's getting more and more problematic. Here we have two bicycles that are of different colors, but they have similar intended use. And this bicycle has aluminum frame. It's not a carbon fiber frame, but it does have a carbon fiber fork, and the steer tube is also made of carbon fiber. My friend rides this bicycle, so he brought it in for a service overhaul and asked me to have a look and make sure that everything is okay. And I told him what I'm telling you now, that for carbon fiber parts I took the fork out, washed it, took a look at it, hit it with a small coin to listen to sounds. But the only way to really be sure that carbon fiber is okay is to take it to a professional ultrasonic scanning or sort of an X-ray. Otherwise you cannot know if it is still okay. And when carbon fiber fails, it can fail without first showing outer signs of cracks. For metals, aluminium, titanium and steel, the cracks will first show on the outside, especially with steel. But with carbon fiber it is not always the case, and sometimes a part can look visually okay. Sometimes you can hear it crack when you try to twist it a bit. Sometimes you cannot until it fails. And it can fail catastrophically, so can steel, but steel shows the cracks on the outside, so they are visible. Another thing with cycling industry is that they are trying to sell low weight. That's a very good selling point, so there is no, on expensive parts especially, but even on cheaper, if you are going for light or racy stuff or carbon fiber, there is not too much material. And so the margin of error is very small, and in case of any manufacturing defect on some stronger force, it can break. What I often hear and see are cracks in the steer tube and the forks, and that is very scary because you're on the ground like this and on your face and very little time to react. And the steer should be, and the fork, the strongest part of the bicycle. It should be stronger than the frame. If it's built properly, when you hit something, if the frame bends before the fork, then it's okay. But usually forks crack way before the frame, which means they are more likely to also fatigue crack, because they are less strong, thus they will flex more and more likely to fatigue break. At least this is what I am saying, what I think based on my knowledge, education and experience, and different people have different experiences, so take it for what it is. I love to be corrected and learn new stuff, really do. Anyways, let me continue. For this bicycle, this is a relatively cheap, relatively heavy steel fork, and what I also see people concerned about is the number of spacers. Is this too much? Will it exert too much torque on the steer tube to break it, to crack it? With steel fork that is too heavy, needlessly heavy, you don't have to worry. Yes, I can remove this and inspect it every year, but it's highly unlikely to break and crack. While this one, this is a lot more problematic, and yes, this does have that insert, that the expander bolt that is deep enough, and it's assembled as good as it can be assembled, but still there is a risk with this stuff. And you cannot always know if everything is okay or if everything is proper without some scanning. And after a fall, will you take your bicycle whenever you drop it to pay and wait for scanning, or you want to get it riding the next day if nothing is bent? That's the difference between carbon fiber and steel, again, in my opinion. So that's one thing. Another thing are the we'll go from front to back, because I'm one of the most absent-minded people in the world and I haven't written a script for this video. So these lovely brake levers, if you want to bleed these levers, you need to use a syringe and a special canister, and if you put some cloth or anything, you still run the risk of some mineral oil, these are Shimano hydraulic brakes, dropping onto your bar tape. So it's not very practical. You need to be very careful, very patient, and then to remove any bubbles you need to put the levers on several different angles, and you can either release the frame, twist the whole frame, but when you're bleeding the rear brake, you want the rear brake caliper to be lower than the hoods. So it's more better results are achieved when you put this lower and then you adjust angle at the stem. But many road cyclists like to have a fixed position that they really like, so it's extra hassle. I made this like a masking tape to mark and to make sure to put it back at the same angle to make sure it's all good. So it is a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of hassle to bleed these brakes, to watch that if you drop a drop of oil on brake pads, they will start squealing and you have problems cleaning it, and often you can because they are porous, so you will need to replace the pads and clean the brake discs. While here with decent mini V rim brakes, I have no problems. I can just wipe off the oil off the plastic, and with decent quality brake pads it stops really good, even in the wet, even in the mud, even in the winter, in the spring, summer. I rode for decades when bicycle didn't have disc brakes and hydraulics and even suspension, and I rode everywhere on mountain trails and on roads and everywhere. So otherwise I would probably have believed what the marketing and many cyclists believe and propagate, that you need disc brakes, they are only safe. No, I don't think so. Again, this is my opinion. I don't want how do I say, I'm not the one choosing bicycle for you or affecting bicycle industry, just sharing my some observations and sort of a rant. Another great thing about this is that for adjusting the reach, there is a very small 2 millimeter hex key below that you cannot really catch even on camera. You can only feel it and try to get your Allen wrench there, hex wrench, and try to tune it. It's very frustrating. I've done this more than once, and every time I do it, it's always frustrating. It always takes a lot of time, and I don't like this design. These levers are simple. Here is a lot of plastic, not very durable. If you drop, and your shifters will not work if it cracks, and it does crack, it does break down a lot. I see a lot of things. People bring in bicycles to me when there are problems, so I can see which stuff breaks down more often than not. So that's a bit of this. My friend rides this for years with no problems, and if you ask him, these are great. But in my experience, they are not. It's expensive rubbish that's marketed and sold as some super high tech. That leads us to gears. So I will make a sort of a skip while we're here, because when you have many gears at the back, the derailleur hanger needs to be super true, super straight. If you fall down and bend it, your shifting will not work properly until you get it aligned or replaced. And index shifting is overrated. With friction shifters like we have on this bike, it just works. You just move the derailleur until you make a shift, and it just works. And I also wish to note the triple cranks. They let me have the lowest gear for loaded very steep, very long climbs, so I can do them easily without using some cassette that is crazily big. While on this other bicycle, he's using a compact crank that I'll also discuss. So the 34 teeth is the smallest chaining of the two. It's a double compact crank, and so my friend needed to put some super big cassette for mountain bikes and the extended derailleur hanger for it to work. And so it creates a lot of extra problems, hassle, and I don't think that I think that one buy is a fad for most practical intents and purposes. Some people will hate me for saying that, but some people get very upset about criticizing the new trends, but I really in my experience, what people have problems with, how can I get shorter gearing without losing the top speed or things, but get a triple. That's been for decades available, and it does the job. It's tried and tested. If you are really competitive and your brain doesn't work when you're breathing very hard and pushing very hard, that's normal. Okay, then get a double. Double will be more forgiving for cross-chaining and things like that when shifting, but it's still better than one by. One by is good for really technical mountain trails, so you have more buttons for the dropper seat post if you really want to ride that technically. Though again, I ride without the dropper seat post without problems. It has limitations, but I enjoyed the ride and went on all sorts of trails, perhaps definitely not as fast, but with enough adrenaline and joy. The same goes for rigid forks. If you have a good suspension, then you need to go over 30 or 40 kilometers per hour downhill to get some adrenaline. But with bicycles that bounce a lot more, I get adrenaline even at 30 kilometers per hour or even less. And when I see what is too much, if I test the limits, it's better, in my opinion, to hit a tree at 20 or 30 kilometers per hour than at 40 or 50. If my goal is to get exercise, to have fun, and to get some adrenaline, I can do that with no suspension as well. Now let's discuss the cranks before we move on. This is what modern bicycle manufacturers think that a crank should look like. This is Shimano Ultegra. I've disassembled it to clean it and do some other things, but this is look at the width and look at the thickness. Now, when you put your load on the pedal, when it is at low, at 6 o'clock, and it's held on here in the bicycle's frame, what force does the pedal exert on the crank? It is trying to twist it, to bend it down, and for that you have here narrow section, and that section is very poor for preventing this kind of bending. If you put force on this side and just on this side like this directly, then yes, this would make sense, but you're using a pedal that sticks out, and so your force is always trying to bend it towards the inside, especially when it's down, when all your weight is there. So when it's here, you're pushing it down, it has some give by moving gears, but when you put all your weight here and then you exert pressure and that bends it, and when Shimano makes glued composite material cranks, then from all that bending start cracks and water enters and there's galvanic corrosion, and they had a lot of problems with cranks breaking, and it's very, how do I say, it's elementary mechanical engineering. Mechanical engineering 101, the first year. And they managed to mess that up because this looks more cool, I guess. I don't know other explanation. And it's bad design for the forces that cranks face. You want a round profile, or if that is impractical for mounting pedals, then you want it to be as close to a square profile as possible. I don't have any old cranks to show the difference right now, unfortunately, and this is, in my opinion, a very, very poor design and poor engineering in those terms. Then we have the pedal mounting interface. When you mount your wheels on a car, the lug nuts, or if you have just the normal nuts, but they all have an angle, a tapered angle at their head. I have an article about that. I'll put a link to that article discussing and show you some pictures. But here it's a flat interface for pedals. I don't have any unscrewed now here to show, but that creates a lot of friction and problems. As you can see, any time I remove pedals, even after short rides, you can see that damage from all that friction, and it also often results in cracks on the interface, and it also forces us to have the different kind of thread for the left pedal. It needs to be left-handed thread so they don't unscrew. If they made that tapered angle on all cranks and all the pedals, if they make it standard, as they did in the automobile industry for mounting wheels decades ago, half a century ago, if not even long before that, you don't have problems with unscrewing. You put right and left hand side wheels with the same right-handed thread, and they don't unscrew. So that's another simple elementary mechanical engineering that is not accepted for some reason in the bicycle industry. Everyone is pretending as if the problem doesn't exist and as if the cranks don't crack here, and they do. Let's move on. Now, I saw an interesting video by a friend sent me that. I want to say hi to my favorite American who sent me the video about the, I think it's Berm Peak. I'll put the link to that video. I don't remember the name, but it was a very cool experiment where they put mountain bikes on different angles of slopes to see when they can no longer hold the traction, and so they either to spin over or slide down. So how much is too much? And just a few days after I got that video, a friend of mine did that in practice, riding off-road, and managed to get a nice little spill. So you don't know what's too much until you see it. Don't know what's enough until you see what's too much. And that was very interesting and fun. But the problem that is very common and a lot more common is that when you ride up steep hills, if you have low enough gearing, you have a problem of the front wheel lifting. Even if you have the proper technique and you lean forward and whatever, and put water of mountain spring in your water bottle or whatever, say a prayer, your bicycle will start lifting. The problem is that they make short chainstays. You can now no longer find bicycles with 45 centimeter or longer chainstays unless you manage to find some touring bicycles, and that is nonsense. You save a few grams and they sell that as aggressive, quick steering and whatnot. It's nonsense. For regular riding and for more comfort and for more stability when you're going faster downhill and for climbing steep hills, you want longer chainstays. That also gives you clearance if you want to put luggage and things like that. And those bicycles work, they are good, and they are now next to impossible to find. Today, if I want to find a steel frame with long chainstays and that uses the threadless stem, that is one of the last advancements in bicycle industry that worked for the cyclist to make it safer and lighter. But the reason it's lighter is why it sells, probably. Not because it's safer. It's safer compared to old quill stems, and so that's a great advantage. But if you want to find frames like that, they are not made of, especially if you're looking for a steel frame, it's next to impossible to find it unless you are happy with disc brakes. And I'll discuss disc brakes now, because rim brakes are getting pushed out, phased out. People think they are useless. I think that people, I don't know. My opinion, my experience is that they work great. They are okay, and high quality rim brakes work very well. High quality disc brakes are better, especially in terms of modulation, not as much in terms of braking power, but in terms of modulation. That's their main advantage, because the total braking power is limited by the tire's traction. Basically, you can lock up wheels even with rim brakes. Disc brakes offer better modulation, especially when it's very muddy and very wet. So if you ride a lot in those conditions, then they might save you more rim changes than anything, but they have problems because they are very prone to rubbing. And as a mechanic, I know that many people have problems with rubbing disc brakes, and that's about 100 times more often than rubbing of rim brakes. And that is because disc brakes, to give you the leverage, using such a small disc, rim brakes use 600 millimeter big disc, so you don't need as much mechanical advantage. But with small discs, even if you put 200 millimeters, that's nothing compared to over 600. So you need a lot of mechanical advantage, and the way to get that is to have the pads move very little for your lever travel, and that means that pads have to be very close. And in the motorcycling and automobile industry, they gave up on trying to not make the disc brakes rub. When they gave up on it, then they made a lot of progress, and the disc brakes are now it when it comes to motorcycles and automobiles, even some heavier machinery on some wheels, some axles. But for bicycles, rubbing is unacceptable because we have very small, low-powered engine, and it's there's no engine noise and there's no wind noise, so you hear the rubbing and it's annoying. And so they have to go through all those gimmicks, whatever was possible. And bicycle disc brakes are really inferior compared to car and motorcycle brakes. They need to be light, they need to not scratch, so a lot of compromise. I'll make a video about I made some video about hydraulic brake functioning. I also want to make a video about the calipers themselves, but it's how do I say, it's marketed as the top of engineering, the pinnacle, but it sucks and it often rubs. And for most use cases, for a vast majority of riders, the ones that I see when I go on rides, it's not really needed. It's not really necessary, and it adds more weight, more complexity, and the rotors, they're braking disc, but the cycling industry calls them rotors for some reason. They bend relatively easily if you drop your bike or lean it against something, or if you use it for commuting and park where there are a lot of bicycles parked. So many downsides to disc brakes, but I feel a bit frustrated because if I want just to... yesterday I got a question on my forum about a simple bicycle for city riding on hilly terrain. So they need gearing, they need reliable brakes, but they want it to be simple and cheap as a commuter. I looked at the offers of modern, and it's very poor. It's very poor compared to the early 2000s years and even to the 90s. At least I've had I have many years. I'm old, so I remember those offers and the situation and how things quickly got into all aluminum and then quickly with suspension and disc brakes, while the threadless stem is the only really high quality improvement of the cycling industry. The rest is a lot more related to taking more money from you and to making you either have to buy expensive tools or take your bicycle to professional mechanics. And even professional mechanics are forced to buy more and more expensive tools and get more and more training because things are getting needlessly complicated. You don't get much in terms of performance, and for especially even sport riding and recreational cycling and commuting, you don't need every gram saved or things like that. You objectively, at least in my opinion, it's about having a reliable bicycle and simple, and just being able to ride it and not worry. If this bicycle drops on the rear derailleur, I have friction shifters. I can get home or to wherever, and then I will see about, I can fix it, eyeball it, fix it, straighten it, and it goes. No problems, no stress. And if I need to, if a cable snaps, I can just replace a cable in a few minutes, and cables are very easy and very light to carry. While with hydraulic brakes, if the housing gets damaged or pulled out of the hose where it's attached either to the levers or to the caliper, and that does in some crashes get pushed out, or when you catch onto something or similar, then you can sit and cry. You cannot fix it on the road. Even in a bicycle shop, you need to change the olives to completely replace the oil inside to remove the air. And so I think it's getting crazy. I think it's not getting crazy, it's getting capitalist and corporate. That's what it is. It's super reasonable, it's super normal, and I expect things to go on in that direction. This video will not change anything, it's just my thinking. And if anyone has a rim brake Surly long haul tracker on sale for my size, about just under 6 foot, I will be very interested. And that's the whole video. I hope you enjoy it, or at least find it a bit entertaining, if nothing else. And I'll see you in some other video where I actually fix something. Thank you again for watching. Cheers, stay cool.